This conference will now be recorded.
Hi guys, good morning. So
Good
let's
morning, Vijay.
good morning. Let's get started. So we were discussing about network security groups yesterday, and we did discuss a few things about it, like what are the areas or what are those resources to which you can assign a network security group to, and we had also discussed about the rules or the priorities of those rules, right? And and then what is the priority between what and what you can assign? It's 100 to 4096, right? So, and there are few default rules that which you will get when by default, which you cannot edit or delete, right? So these are certain things that which we had seen or discussed yesterday, right? So we'll go further and have a scenario, and then we'll try to understand how exactly we can set up these rules and try to simulate it with a couple of scenarios. Um, but this is a simple and straightforward. If you have a multi-tier application, you need to understand what are those ports that which are needed for communication between each tier, right? So if you have a front-end web server, then and then you have backend, let us say SQL or some other application server. So the SQL servers or which whatever are at the backend will not be exposed to the internet, right? So you write those rules by keeping them in two different subnets, or even within the subnet you can put a network security group rule to the network interface card itself if required, right? So that's how you go and write certain rules and tag them to the subnets, or you can also tag them to your network interface card of your virtual machine, right? So that's what we discussed yesterday. We'll go and see a couple of scenarios and then try to understand how do we enable rules and the stuff. Okay, so for our lab, what I did is I did spin a couple of virtual machines, and we have a subnet which we have two subnets which we'll be using one of the subnet to kind of assign the network security group rules, and then we can see how exactly we can configure and tag these rules to the subnet or network security group subnets or network interface cards. Okay, now I have two virtual machines, and these two virtual machines, whatever we created, let us take VM1, and this VM1 is created, right, is created, and there are no ports that which are allowed uh, you know for this particular virtual machine from external, right? So which means that the default ports that which we used to enable during the creation of the virtual machines are not enabled. Okay, so which is nothing but 3389, what we used to enable during the creation of the virtual machine is not enabled. So how it will be in general practice is you will create a network security group, and then you put certain rules around in that, and those rules will be tagged to this particular subnet where this VM is residing, or to the network interface card. Most of the times it will be the subnet of the virtual machine, right, where the virtual machine is residing. So let us go and first enable RDP, and then try give that RDP access to these two VMs, because these two VMs doesn't have, I mean, there is no incoming port that which is open for these VMs for the end user from the internet to access these things, right? So that is the first thing that which we are going to look into it, right? So where do I go for the network security group rules is, right, I had already added that into my favorites. If not, you can go and also search it from here, and then write network security group and then access it from here also, right? You can access from here also, right? So I'll go and access it from my favorites, and then create a network security group rule from here. Right, so let me go and create a network security group. Let us say it as NSG1, and then I'll put in the resource group, which is already there, which is NRG, and then the location is West India, because all my VMs are in West India location. Right? Now I created this particular network security group rule, but I have to go and add those rules that whatever are needed for me, right? So when I am accessing the virtual machine from the outside world, which means the internet, for Azure, it's an inbound traffic, right? So if you want to allow these machines to be accessed from the outside, so what you do is you go and define an inbound rule, right, within the network security group that which you created, right? So as I said, there are default rules which are kind of 65,500 and 65,000 and 65,001, which basically allows certain things. If you see it, the traffic between the virtual machine is allowed, and traffic from the load balancer, which we will be discussing tomorrow, what load balancer is and importance of that, to any of the destination. So if you have a load balancer and to any destination, the inbound traffic is allowed, which means that any traffic that which is coming through your load balancer, there is no restriction as such, right? And all inbound traffic, this priority is number is very high, which means that any other policy or any other rule that which you create on top of this will be overriding this one, right? Deny will be overridden by this and this, right? So that's the reason if you add an additional rule here, that takes precedence of this deny rule, right? So that's how it will work. So let us go and create a rule for our RDP, right? So let me go and add. Right, so what I'll do is, because we are accessing this from the internet, so I'll go and select the service tag, and within that service tag you have multiple options. We discussed this yesterday, right? So if you scroll it down, you have VNets, you have load balancer, you have application gateways, and so on, right, within the service tag. So I'll stick to this internet, right? Within the service tag, I'll select not responding. Okay, service tag. Right. So if you go and scroll it down, what happened? Oh, goodness. Give me a minute, guys. Let me fix this. Right. So we are selecting service tag here, and within the service tag, you definitely see multiple options. If you scroll down here, for some reason, it is not. Right. So we had seen yesterday, right? So it's internet or application. What do you call it as VPN or gateways or load balancer and so on. You have a list of different service tags. So, right. So for today, what for this lab, what we are going to So at last, right? So these are the different service tags that which you have based on your requirement. You can go and select, right? So for our lab, because we are allowing traffic from the internet, so I'll go and select internet as the source, right? And source port, most of the times, if this will be star, which means that there is no specific port that which we are defining here, that should be fine, right? So destination is what is very important. So what is that you want to allow this, right? Whether it is to a virtual IP, it is an IP address or virtual network or a specific security group. So I'll give this as any because I want to allow traffic to all my virtual machines. That should be fine to any, right? So I'll go and define the destination port as 3389, right? Define that as 3389. So what protocol it is, TCP or UDP, or whether you want to allow or deny, right? So we want to allow this particular port 3389. So what we do is we'll select the option allow here. Now, as I said the other day, the priority should be selected cautiously. So you need to give some gap between the numbers that what you go and select there, and we'll put the name for this particular rule, right? Let's allow RDP. So that's the rule. That is the name that which we'll give for identification purpose. Right? So we'll go and add it. Right? So you can add rules like this. You can put multiple port numbers within this single rule as well. So that can also be done. So what we do is we'll go and add this incoming rule that whatever we created. So we created this rule in this network security group, right? NSG1. Now we go and tag this particular NSG1 to our, what do you call it as, subnet, right? Let us go and do it. So let us go to our subnets. So as I said, what are the two areas where a network security group can be associated? It can be associated to network interface card of the VM or subnet, right? There are the two areas. Let me go to the subnet of the subnets what we have and then try to assign this particular network security group that what we created. Okay, so virtual networks. Right. Go to the subnet. Right here you have an option to select the network security group. Right now there is no network security group that which is assigned to this particular subnet. Right, so I'll go and select the network security group that which I created. So you can see that network security group is tagged, and then you save it. So what it means is all the resources which are part of this particular network security group. So what are those resources that are part of the connected devices? You can go and see. So the connected devices that whatever you have, basically these network interface cards are again tagged to your VMs. So these two will definitely have, what do you call it as, those rules applied, right? So that means if I go to the virtual machine, the VM1, which is part of that subnet, should be able to, we should be able to access them from the internet because you have a rule which will allow traffic from the internet, right? So let us go and try to access it, right? And see whether we are able to access it or not. It takes some time. Let us re-verify whether we associated it correctly or not once. subnets. Within the subnets, we have subnet 1, which is with NSG1. So we should be able to access this machine. Let us see once again.
I think we need to give access in the virtual machine. No?
No. By default, RDP will be enabled. Let me go and refresh this. Okay, so let that get refreshed. We'll quickly see some other. We'll come back to that. Maybe it may take a couple of minutes, but we should be able to access that. Okay, so let me. And you can see this rule is already there in place, right? It is got tagged because you have this rule at the subnet level, right? So you can see this allow RDP 3389 because this is the rule that which we created just now. Earlier it was not there. So you can see that rule, which means that you have this rule to access your virtual machine, right? So we'll wait for a minute or so, then we'll come back to that, right? Now, likewise, what we can do is we can create a multiple rules and associate to your VMs or to your network interface cards. But a typical scenario, what we will be into is most of the times we'll have multi-tier applications, right? So your front end, then your could be a database and could be an application, right? So if all these are in a same subnet, a same virtual network, right? All these are in the same virtual network. So what you there will not be restriction any as such, right? So what you as a Azure administrator may have to do is you may have to put these rules here for each subnet, right? So if this VM that whatever you have or SQL is part of subnet 1, then you go and either create a rule for at the subnet level or at the virtual machine level and so on, so that only the required traffic will flow between the virtual machines, right? Now, however, for the internet, whoever is sitting here, you will have only the required ports to be. Most of the time, if this is a web server, that we will be discussing tomorrow, how it will be, you will have something called as load balancer in front of this, right? You have something called as load balancer, Azure load balancer. Now that load balancer will have a connectivity to the pool of web servers that whatever you have here, right? If you have 3 or 4 web servers, there will be a front end connectivity over the internet to the load balancer, which again you are kind of not allowing the web traffic directly to hit or to be available for the end user. And these web servers will have a private IP addresses, right? Whereas the load balancer will have a public IP address. This will have a public IP address, right? Now you from the internet will access using this public IP address, and you will hit one of these 3 web servers through this load balancer, which will have a public IP address. Now, how will you be hitting this one of these web servers is basically there is something called as front end and back end configuration within your load balancer that will help you to configure the front end IP address, and that will help you to configure the pool of back end web servers, right? And there is also something called as health probe that which will basically identify which web server is active or which web server is down, right? So that if user tries to hit this load balancer, the load balancer is intelligent enough based on the health rules that which you defined at the load balancer level to identify to which web server it has to go. So what we are doing here is we are allowing only port 80, that too through a private IP address. So this is how a general situation will be, right? Now your load balancer will be on facing the public internet, so where you will have rules here, and you will have network security groups between your web server and SQL server, where you just allow um, uh, what is that port number 14 11114, I think so, if I'm not wrong. So whatever the SQL port that which we use, right? So or the backend web server, right? Backend application server. So you'll only restrict the traffic to that, right? So you don't get anything beyond that to be opened. Or there could be a situation you have another subnet for infrastructure related stuff, right? Let us say infrastructure related. So what are those? Like, let us say that you have Active Directory domain controller, right? Or you have a DNS server and so on, right? Now, these are these. If you want to enable security, you go and put a NSG here also. Now, this NSG will allow only the traffic that whatever is needed. For example, for authentication, the LDAP traffic, right? Or secure LDAP traffic, or DNS traffic, right? So all those things based on your requirement, you go and jot down those ports or the rules that whatever are needed, and you go and tag these rules to individual subnet, or if you want to go and put that to a kind of network interface, you can also do that, right? So another interesting scenario is that what we need to know is, let us say that you have a subnet and you have a NSG rule associated with this, and you also have a virtual machine within this, and there is another NSG rule that which is assigned to the network interface card of this VM. Okay. Now any traffic that which is coming from here, from the internet or intranet, if this is denied, the rule is denied here, for example, the RDP rule is denied here, though it is allowed here, the traffic will not come inside, right? So the other way also, if you have allow here, right? If you have an allow option here and you have deny here, though the traffic is entering from this to this, but your traffic will be dropped here, right? So we need to understand those things little bit, but it is pretty straightforward. The same with the outgoing, right? So the outgoing also, if there is a traffic outgoing block at the network interface card level, it anyway will not leave this network interface card itself, right? Or if you are allowing the traffic at network interface card level, but you are blocking here at NSD, nothing will go out. So it's just like situations that which you may get into. We need to just try to understand what is the resultant rule that which will get applied, right? Outcome of the rule. But try to avoid putting the rules at the network interface card level, because this is too complex to manage, not recommended as well. And there could be a situation or chances one or two machines within the subnet you may get into, but we have to definitely try to avoid putting these rules at the network interface card level, right? Though we have that option, right? Let's see if we are able to access it. Quickly check that rule once, whatever we created. So while I'll check, if you have any questions, we can take it. Okay, so we'll try to check this, come back to that. Let us restart and we'll come back to that. Okay, so if you have any questions on this, so we can take, we'll come back to that once that reboots. We'll see what exactly the problem is. But this is how you go and tag the network security group rules to the VMs or the network interface cards, right? So if you have any questions, we'll take. Otherwise, we'll move to our next topic, which is routing, route tables. Another small important topic, which is part of AZ103. We can go and discuss that as well. Okay, so I'll take it as no questions. So we'll move to our next topic, which is nothing but our route rules or routing tables, right? Routing tables or route tables. Right. So if you are into a system administration or network administration, you might already aware of this particular thing, right? There could be some routes that which we define within our network uh, that basically tells your devices that what path they should follow to reach the destination, right? Now, for example, there are multiple devices within your environment. There could be multiple routers, which means that device A has multiple paths to reach to device C, D, or whatever, right? So it can go through path A, path B, path C, and path D, right? So what you want to do is, let us say that there is a situation or scenario, you want to route all the traffic through some appliance or security appliance, or only through one router, right? So there could be a situation or requirement like that. So that time what you go and do is you go and define something called as route tables, right? Now route, what does it do is it defines certain rules, right? Certain rules that which will tell your subnets or the devices that, okay, so if you are trying to reach so and so IP range, goes through this path, right? So that's what you are going to go and define. So that's what we are going to do here in Azure as well. So Azure also provides you a solution to go and define your own route paths within something called as route table. So you go and write your routes within the route table. So whatever the routes that which you define within this route table will be followed to these subnets that which you go and tag, right? So let us quickly go and see how does this route tables here look like, right? So route tables, right? Right. So if you go and click on add, like any other resource, you just go and create a route table with a name. Let us say that training route table, and then I'll put this in a network security group NRG, right? So let us create, then we'll see what are those options that which you have within the route table. Then we'll understand better what is that we are going to do and what is that we need to go and create a route. Right, so if you look into this, there are something called as routes here, right? So as I said, within your route table, you go and define your routes, which basically tells how the traffic should flow, right? Let me click on add. Now what this add option will give you is you go and define the different route types of routes, right? So from which subnet, this is what the address prefix, right? This here you go and put the subnet prefix, right? If any traffic that which is coming from so and so from x.x.x.x slash some 16 or something, if a traffic is coming through this, what is the next hop for any traffic that which is coming from here, right? Now you have multiple options to put that as a hop, right? Now it could be a network gateway, it could be a virtual network, it can also go to the internet, or it could be a virtual appliance. Now what a virtual appliance here is, it could be a appliance on your Azure itself, right? So which most of the appliances or most of the devices these days are coming as an appliance, right? It could be a router or whatever, Cisco router or any router for that matter, right? So then you go and select it as a router, right? You have other options like network gateway, virtual network, and Ethernet as well, right? So if you are putting this as a virtual appliance, let us say that that's the router, and then you go and specify the IP address of the router. IP address of the router. Now what will happen is any traffic that which is coming from x.x.x.x/16 subnet. So where it will go? It will go through this particular IP address of a router or a security device also, right? Security device. Let us say you have a requirement to audit all the traffic that whatever is moving out, right? In those situations, that could also be a firewall appliance or some appliance that tracks or captures the traffic. You can also go and provide those details here, which means that the traffic, the whatever it is flowing through, will definitely go through the device that whatever you specify here, right? Likewise, you go and create multiple rules within a multiple routes within a route table, right? Now what we had seen, a route table is are you able to hear me, guys? I see a message saying that organization is experiencing technical difficulties, kind of. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, fine, Vijay. Like I can hear you. This is funny here.
Okay, yeah, thanks. So because I'm seeing a message on GoToMeeting saying that there are some technical difficulties or whatever, right? So within a route table, you define multiple routes, right? And these routes, what they do, they define the path that which your subnet, right, should follow, or the next hop for your subnet, right? So that's what we will be doing here in the routes. Once you create these routes should be associated to something else, right? So you just created a route, but what are those things to which these routes should be associated? Your routes will be associated to the subnets, right? Now once you create the route, you define the route rules, then you go and associate those things to your subnets, right? So that's how the traffic, whatever you want to pass it through certain path, you go and tag those things to your subnets, right? So define the routes within the route table and associate those things to your subnets so that the traffic will flow through the right channel, right? So that's what a subnet association is needed here, right? So route tables, it's a very small topic, but it is kind of important, right? So we'll go and quickly see how our scenario will be for our demonstration, right? So what we are going to do here is we are going to have a VNet, and within this VNet we'll have 3 different subnets, okay? Right, we'll have 3 different subnets: subnet A, subnet B, and subnet C, right? Now each subnet will have VMs, right? Now, as we all know that by default, machines in all the subnet will be able to communicate with each other. Subnet B, subnet A, right? Subnet C. What it means is subnet B, when it want to communicate with subnet C, it can directly communicate, right? So as A and C, so as A, Now what we want to do is, let us say that there is a router here, right? There is some device here. Let us think so. There is some device here, and we want all the traffic from subnet B to subnet C to be routed only through this device, which is in subnet A. Similarly, whatever the traffic that which is passing through from subnet C to subnet B should also go through this particular channel only through this device, right? So what we are trying to achieve here is we are going to make sure that whatever the traffic that which is reaching subnet C will route through a device which you have in subnet A, right? And similarly, whatever the traffic that which is coming out of subnet C or any machine that which is trying to communicate from subnet C to subnet B should also pass through this particular channel itself, right? Now,
Well, Vijay.
so we are going to go with Windows 2016 routing and remote access. What it means is we are basically, hello, are you guys there? Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, actually, there is a break in your voice, Vijay.
Okay, let me repeat that again. Sorry for that. I'm not sure something is wrong. I'm seeing few messages that there's some technical difficulty or whatever. Right. So you have a virtual network, and within this virtual network you have subnets, and these subnets by default will be able to communicate with each other as there is no restriction, which means that there are different routes within the subnet through which the devices in each subnet will be able to communicate with each other. So that is the default setting, right? So what we are trying to achieve here is whatever the traffic that which is coming from subnet B and trying to communicate to subnet C, any device in subnet C, it has to go through a device which is nothing but a router in subnet A. So that's what we are going to do it. Similarly, any traffic that which is going through subnet C should go through the same device that which you have in subnet A and then reach to subnet B, right? Now, what is this device that which we are going to put here is a router, okay? A router we are going to put because we don't have a router, so appliance. So what we are going to do is we are going to install a Windows 2016 operating system, and then we put on that something called as routing and remote access, okay, which basically a role that which comes with the Windows operating system that converts your OS into a router, okay, which is nothing but a software defined SDN, we call it as software defined network solution, right? So what we do is, and then we'll go and specify or create a rule, anything that which is coming through the subnet, which is subnet C, should has to go through this particular machine, which will have an IP address, right? This particular device will have an IP address. So anything that which is coming through subnet C will have to go through this IP address. Anything that which is coming through subnet B will also have to go and have this particular, I should also go through this particular IP address, right? Let us say that the IP address of the VNet subnet is, let us say 10.0.0/16, and you take this as 10.0.0.0/24, and you take this subnet as 10.1.0.0/24, and you take this subnet as 10.2.0.0/20, right? Now this router, which is again a Windows machine, will get some IP address. Let us say that it is 10.0.0.4, right? Let us say that this is the IP address of this machine. Now what we have to do is we have to go and create a rule, right? So how do we do it? Let us create a rule for our subnet B. Let us think so. Now what is our subnet B? Let us go and create a rule for the subnet B, which is a route for subnet B, right? Go and add. Now, first thing what you have to do is, let us give a name, that is there, subnet B route. We are going to see this practically tomorrow because today's time is not enough. Subnet B route. Now, what is the IP address of this subnet? What is the IP subnet range or address prefix, which is 10.1.0.0/24. 10.1.0.0/24. Now, any traffic that which is coming through this particular address prefix should have to go through a virtual appliance. And what is that virtual appliance through which you are sending the traffic? It is a router which is sitting in your subnet A, which has got an IP address of 10.0.0.4, right? 10.0.0.4, right? So you are defining a rule which says, okay, boss, any traffic that which is coming with this particular IP address prefix should have to, next hop is so and so. So the next hop for this particular subnet is this, which means that all the traffic will flow, right? So let us go and create. Likewise, you can also go and create another route for your subnet C, right? So what you go and tell here, anything that which is coming from the address prefix 10.2.0.0/24 should go through 10.0.0.4, right? The same thing what you did for subnet B, right? So let us say that subnet C route 10.2.0.0/24 will go through a virtual appliance, which is nothing but 10.0.0.4. Right? Now you define two routes, right? You define routes, but subnet B is, you have to tell the subnet B, right, to use these routes, and similarly you have to tell subnet C to use these routes, that whatever you created in the route table. That's where the association of the routes will come into picture, right? You go to the subnet and associate these routes within this route table. That's what you are going to go and do it. Tell your subnet B and subnet C, boss, you use these routes, right? That's what this association is, right? Go to the subnet and associate these things, right? How do you associate? You go to the subnet by expanding the virtual network, because you have only one VNet in West India. You go and select that, and then, right? And within this one VNet, you have two subnets to which, right? So likewise, you can go and assign or associate your subnets, both the subnets, to this particular route table, so that the subnets are aware that what route they should be following, right? So I'll go and associate both the subnets, right? Two subnets that whatever we have, and these two subnets are aware that they have to use the routes that whatever are defined here, right? So likewise, you can go and create multiple routes and associate those routes to your subnet. Okay, so routes can be associated to subnets, and the subnets will know that what is the route they have to follow based on the routes that whatever you defined in the route table, right? Now tomorrow we are going to simulate this entire stuff, so I'll keep this lab ready before our session. I'll have the subnets and all those things created and keep it ready. We'll install routing and remote access within the class itself, but in real time it will not be the case, right? So you will not have all these things, right? So you'll have a device, and you get those details from your network team, and then you go and create a routes, right? So that's how it will be. You will not be having the software router, because for our lab simulation we are going to go and use this particular, what you call it, as a solution, right? So any questions on this theory on routing part? Any questions, guys? If you have any questions, you can ask. Just try to check this if this is fixed. It's not. I need to check this, guys. I'll check that what exactly the problem is. Ideally, it should be working. Okay, I'll check that. There should not be a problem. We'll have that discussion tomorrow further and see what exactly is causing the problem. So this will be the continuation. We'll see. We'll try to relook at the NSD tomorrow for first couple of first 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and then we'll try to see what exactly the problem there is, and then we'll go ahead with the the routing tables. And what we are left is within the network quite a few extensive topics. Tomorrow's topic will be mostly on the lab, all right, on this routing table or route table we call it as. And then we have something called as load balancers, right? And these load balancers we just, as I said, will be kind of discussed tomorrow, maybe day after. If tomorrow time doesn't permit, then we'll go with Azure DNS. For this, I may have to have a public DNS. I'm just trying to get. I have one. If we can use that, then we can use it. I'm just trying to include this in this particular what do you call training. Earlier trainings I never used to cover this Azure DNS zone. This will see it, and then we'll have something called as point to site, and then site to site. These are all solutions to integrate your on-prem to the Azure, and then the last one is express route. Right, so quite a few things which are left. Hopefully, we'll be able to complete most of these by this weekend, or else maybe mid of next week. I think these two are extensive topics, and this will also be extensive topic tomorrow. This will take one class. So I think it will take mid of next week to complete the entire networking stuff. Okay, so then we'll move on to storage, and then Active Directory, identity, and access addition. Okay, so that's how we will plan. I want to complete this entire networking, and then we want to go to the next thing, so that we are in a right flow. Okay, so if you have any questions, you can ask. I'll check that what is the problem with that network security group. Then we'll discuss on that further tomorrow. Okay. Yeah, you can ask if you have any questions. Otherwise, I think we are done for today. And I did share a few documents. I'm not sure whether you got it or not.
Yeah, I got it, Vijay. I was going through all that documents. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, guys, if no questions, any questions, you can ask. If no questions, then we'll catch up tomorrow.
Actually, na, those documents asking for permission for me.
Oh, is it? Okay. I'll check with Lakshmi. I think you should have straight away access to them. I'll check with her. Otherwise,
Okay.
I'll get your ID added to the shares that which she has enabled. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Right, guys. We'll catch up tomorrow.